On today's show, health, fit, chemistry, shooting, a bunch of things that could derail the Denver Nuggets 22-23 season that we should probably kind of talk about to be on the lookout for as the season begins. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets. We appreciate you making this show your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Matt Moore, last day, he's on vacation. He'll be back next week, so the duo will be back together going over some of these offseason topics. Today, though, I made a list, and I put them into 8 categories of things that could derail the Denver Nuggets season. We all know every time I think when we analyze a team, we tend to look at the brightest timeline. Okay, fully healthy, what does this team look like? Or everybody fits into place, what does it look like? I want to talk about some of the things that, hey, these are things that could happen. Some of them pretty likely, fairly likely, some of them pretty unlikely, and talk about how would that affect the season if they were to happen. We'll start with general injuries because this is true for every team. But I thought it would be, so rather than just say, oh, what if Jokic gets hurt? I wanted to go by each of the main players and say, if they were to miss extended time, say 20 games, how would it affect the season? How would Denver be able to account for that? The first one is Jokic. If Jokic was out for 10 games, I think it would meaningfully impact the Nuggets' standings in terms of, I think they can be a top 3 seed and have home court advantage in the first round, maybe even the second round. If he missed 10 games, that becomes in jeopardy. I don't think Denver falls out of the playoffs, but I do think they start to go into that 4, 5, 6, 7, portion of the seeding there, which means you could be a play-in team if things really break bad or if other things happen. 10 lost games, I think Denver can survive it, but it probably costs them a spot or 2 in the playoffs. If he missed 20 games, now I think you're really talking about, are they going to be a play-in team with so many other variables, Murray's health and MPJs and, some of the other stuff we're going to get to. If Jokic missed 20 games, I think now you're looking at it and going, I would not be surprised if they were a 7 seed if Jokic was out for 20 games. If he's out for 30 games, I think you're almost certainly going to be a play-in team. If Murray was fully healthy and never had the injury, if Michael Porter's same thing, I think, okay, Denver could survive even 30 games of Jokic. But the fact that they are such big question marks, if Jokic missed 20 games, that's a lot of strain to put on guys that haven't been healthy. And now I think you're talking about, all right, the Nuggets are almost certainly a play-in team at best, and worst case scenario, they could fall out. And if Jokic missed half the season or more, Denver season, I think, probably goes up in flames. Luckily for Denver, Jokic has been pretty durable, knock on wood. So I don't think, the probability of that is probably pretty low, but nonetheless, wanted to get that out of the way. Jokic, most important piece, 10, 20 games, Denver season not totally derailed. 30, completely changes things. 40, you're talking about disaster. Gordon, if Aaron Gordon was out, here's what's interesting. Aaron Gordon's really good. He elevates their ceiling. He elevates their floor to some degree as well. But I think Denver could survive Aaron Gordon going out for 20, 30, 40 games. Not because he's replaceable, but in the regular season, I do think you could plug a Jeff Green into that role, maybe even a Zeke Naji, and your win total. Like if you had to survive 40 games without Aaron Gordon, if he goes out in October and he doesn't come back till February, you move guys up in the rotation. Zeke Naji is going to play a little bit more, maybe with starters. Michael Porter might slide to power forward a little bit more, which actually might, and there's some benefits to doing that. You've got Jeff Green. You have guys at power forward who I think in a regular season can provide most of what Aaron Gordon provides to you. In the playoffs, no question. It becomes an essential piece. In the regular season, I think you just adjust. And then more importantly, if Aaron Gordon misses a bunch of time, depending on where that happens, like say he misses going into the playoffs and then returns for the playoffs, now you have a big wrench because Denver, part of what makes them championship contenders is they have this starting lineup that we all believe in. If you don't get the reps, obviously that affects you in the playoffs, and you're going to have to earn those reps in the playoffs, which is always tough. So it certainly would affect things if he were to miss that much time. But I do think from a record standpoint, Denver could survive Aaron Gordon better than they could a bunch of other players. If Kentavious Caldwell-Pope was out, again, I think Denver could survive the regular season. If he was missing 30, 40 games, I mean, they brought him in to be a key contributor. But they also brought him in to be a low usage contributor who makes shots, which I think he's going to do, and defend, which I think he's going to do. If he missed 10 games, Don't know that you would necessarily notice it. You move Bruce Brown or Christian Brown or somebody else into that starting lineup, maybe Davon Reed. Again, miss 10, 20 games, maybe you get one more loss in a regular season situation. You miss 30, 40. Now you're talking about what we talk about every year about you need to get the reps together. Like KCP is part of that best punch. So regular season, you might survive it only dropping a little bit, if at all, in the standings, but you don't get that chemistry. And then now you're talking about the starting five only have 200 minutes together by the time you go to the playoffs. That'd be the real drag. But if he missed 10 to 15 games, which is about average for a starter, but you miss about 10 games in the year, if they miss that, I don't think Denver's going to necessarily feel it. Bones Highland's an interesting one. If Bones Highland has injuries, I think this one would actually cost Denver quite a bit. They lost Monte Morris. You have Ish Smith, but I don't think the plan is to play Ish Smith a ton of minutes. I think he's going to be like, I think if you get to the Ish Smith portion of the season, either A, you're just plugging a hole, like something happened, something popped up, a little injury, rolled ankle or whatever. But I think also like your plan is for Bones Highland to be that guy, and you want to get big around him. So you want to play Davon Reed or Christian Brown at the 2. You want to play Bruce Brown, who's 6'5", but he's really strong, plays bigger than he is. You want to play with that length. If Bones goes out, all of a sudden you don't have a great secondary playmaker. Is it Colin Gillespie? Is it Ish Smith for extended minutes? Now you're talking about small, not as good spacing and shooting around. I'm going to talk about that part here in a little bit, the shooting. Bones provides that. I actually think Bones is one of the more important, irreplaceable pieces on the Nuggets this season because of the Jamal Murray injury and just because of the depth at that position. I think they need Bones Highland in that second unit. So to me, he misses 10 games. He's probably going to miss 10 games, by the way. Like a guy his size, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but rolled ankle here or there to be expected. But if Bones misses 20 games, I think you start to worry about, is the bench going to look like last year when you didn't have a bench unit that was designed to play together, and all of a sudden all of the players are struggling. I think that could happen. Jeff Green is out. The bench would become very inexperienced if Jeff Green was out. We're talking about Bones Highland with 1 year under his belt. Davon Reed, who basically doesn't even have a year, like a half a year under his belt. You've got Zeke Naji, who's got 100 games under his belt. Bruce Brown, who's an experienced guy, like one veteran, although he's only played in the league for like 3 or 4 years, so he's experienced. I mean, that's enough experience, but it's not like he's Jeff Green, who has 10 plus years of experience. So if Jeff Green got hurt, I do think that second unit would become the swings night to night would be really, really huge. Jeff Green represents a sort of veteran and calming presence and consistent, steady presence in that second unit that I think would be very important. So if he missed 20 games, I actually think Denver would be in a little bit of a tight spot looking for somebody to replace what he provides. And then if Bruce Brown was out, I think Denver's defensive depth would get really thin. So if he misses real time, Denver all of a sudden you start to look at, do they have an ace defensive lineup? They probably don't. Right now, you either swap out Aaron Gordon or Michael Porter and you put Bruce Brown in that spot, and you have like a really interesting defensive unit. If you put KCP, Bruce Brown, and Aaron Gordon around Jokic and Murray, to me, elite defensive group. You have that. If Bruce Brown's out for an extended period of time, Denver's defense, I don't think is going to be very good. He's that important. So same goes with KCP. If he's out for an extended period of time, Denver probably doesn't have an ace defensive lineup they can throw out there. And as a result, they're probably going to slide in their overall defensive rankings on the team. So I think for him, that's another one that I think is noteworthy. So I wanted to get that out in segment 1. In segment 2, we'll talk about Michael Porter's health and Jamal Murray's health, because both of those things they're not like everyone else where we don't see an injury on the horizon. These are guys that are more okay, but they are coming back from some kind of injury, so we want to see what they look like, and that's a little bit higher of a risk. But first, tell you about BetOnline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find your favorite sports events, the number one source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here, segment 2 of the Locked On Nuggets podcast, Friday edition. I'm solo today. Adam Matas from DNVR. Matt Moore will be back next week. He's enjoying a much deserved vacation. We're going over things that could derail the Nuggets season. For people in the chat, love it. I can't read the chat though. Unfortunately, doing the one-man show, I'm doing a little bit of all of this today. So I appreciate the comments, but unfortunately, if you have questions or things, talk amongst yourselves. Michael Porter's health. We have not seen video of Michael Porter working out all summer. And maybe this is a personal choice. I suspect it is a personal choice. In years past, we've seen a lot of Michael Porter, with him and his trainer doing different workouts, playing shoot around, doing this. We saw some of that earlier, like in April, May. I don't think it means anything specific, but we also haven't heard of any 5-on-5 workouts. Now, this is an interesting thing because, when Jamal Murray played the other day, this isn't like, you shouldn't read too much into these things, but when he played, the entire team came out. Michael Malone sat down and talked to the media, wanted to talk about it. What a big moment it was. And it's great for him. It was the most serious workouts he's had. I would love a similar update on Michael Porter. I would love from somebody in the organization, or if there is a positive update to be had, something of a, hey, he did some workouts today. He's full go, or he's close to full go, or here's the plan, something. The fact that we haven't heard of it, I don't think it means you don't want to connect dots that aren't there, but you should point out that there's dots on the board. It's like, okay, well, we haven't seen it, and we haven't really had a solid update. So the thing with Michael Porter's career to this point, he's played 4 seasons in the NBA, but he's really only played in 2 of those 4 seasons. One of those was planned when you drafted him. You knew there's going to be a redshirt year. They knew, okay, he's probably going to need this second surgery, and it's going to cost him. We're going to have to slow play it. The last year was not the case. But even when he was healthy in both of the seasons, there were moments where he couldn't get on the court for various reasons. One, I think Michael Malone making him earn his time onto the court, like all rookies that first year. He didn't play a whole lot in October, November, December. Eventually did start playing. But the minutes he's played and shared the court with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are not very many. Something I put this out the other day, but something like 1,000 minutes, basically, which is nothing, but it's also not a huge sample. I think they need to at least double that this year, meaning in 2 seasons, they've played about 1,000 minutes together. I think the best case scenario for the Nuggets is that he plays another 1,000 minutes or so with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, somewhere around there. I think the Nuggets' starting lineup last year, the starting lineup, not even combos of the starting lineup, but the actual 5, the most common 5-man lineup, which was Monte Morris, Will Barton, Jeff Green, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic, had somewhere around 800 minutes. To Denver this year, it's not unrealistic to think that those guys can get to 1,000 minutes or close. We'll say 800 minutes, maybe just like last year, get to that same mark where those 3, again, not the full starting lineup, but those 3, Murray, Porter, and Jokic, are on the court together, which would just about double what they've done. They need that. Being in and out of the lineup this year, if Michael Porter plays October but not November, and then December but not January, and then February but not March, and then he's back in April, if you're kind of in and out like that, I don't think you can get the traction that you need. If there's a bunch of little starts and stops with Michael Porter, now if you sit out back-to-backs, or you don't, miss a game here, but not a full month, but just like 2-3 games, and then you're back, I don't think that disrupts it nearly as much. But if you do start to miss weeks at a time, teams they'd establish new rhythms. They'd establish new chemistries. He needs to be on the court. I don't think he plays more than 65 games. Like, that would be the high end anyway, just because I think Denver's going to be planning for that, building in some rest. But if it's below like 40 or, games or so, then I think you start to say, how much chemistry can you develop, especially if it's not 40 in a row to end the season, but it's really 10 here, 10 there, 10 there. I think that could derail the season, because the Nuggets' best chance at a championship absolutely includes Michael Porter being a key piece to that. Might not be a key piece defensively, might not close every game in a playoff series, but their best punch still has to feature him, and he's still going to be very important to them going deep into the playoffs. And then on top of that, they don't really have any depth at small forward. So if he comes out of the game, like if you just say Michael Porter's going to miss a month, who's the starting 3? You could debate this. Is it Bruce Brown? That's probably their best lineup, but then what happens to the bench? Is there enough defense there? Is it Davon Reed? Well, he's not exactly a proven player, offense or defense, that's going to fill out there. Is it Jeff Green? He's the veteran, but then your bench doesn't have the veteran presence. It's not clear to me that there's a perfect option. Also, Jeff Green's not a small forward. He's definitely a power forward, if not a center now. Small forward, you're playing him out of position. Is Aaron Gordon there? Could get a little bit clunky. So to me, his health absolutely could derail the season. And I think this is why people are lower on the Nuggets. Like, this is why Vegas has the odds a little bit lower than everybody, Nuggets fans. Because again, you have to factor in the very real possibility of Michael Porter just not being that healthy. And then on top of that, so that's number 2. I did general injuries in segment 1, Michael Porter's health. The third one with Michael Porter that I think is probably less of a risk than some people in this chat will think. Listen to the show, but it is still a risk that's there, and that is just Michael Porter Jr.'s fit. Michael Porter's best basketball has come with Jamal Murray out. Now, so part of this is, again, he has played so few games that his sample size is all going to be skewed. But his best basketball has come whenever Murray wasn't there and he elevated to basically second scorer because he's such a talented player. I don't think this has anything to do with Michael Porter and what he can do. I just think it has to do with what Michael Porter and what he's been able to do with the Nuggets. If you get extended run with Murray, Porter, and Jokic, if you get that 800 or 1,000 plus minutes, I believe the Nuggets are going to find a way to maybe, if not maximize his contribution to the team, get a lot closer than what they have now. But there is still a risk that that just never happens, that Michael Porter is healthy for 65 games, maybe 70 games. He surprises us all, plays 70 games, but that the fit never, but like we're in April, they've played the whole season together and we're still like, yeah, but it's not quite clicking. Like it still feels like in one hand out the other, and you're not really better with him on the court, and there's something there. I think that risk is a lot lower. I honestly think it has more to do with the fact that Michael Porter just hasn't played a lot of basketball. He's played 100 basketball games, 120 basketball games in 5 years. 5 years. Senior year of college, redshirt year, played 2 years, missed last year. That's 5 years. I think it has more to do with that than it has to do with some flaw in Michael Porter's game. Even though I think those flaws are there, I just think they can be overcome with experience. So his fit, him just not fitting in offensively and defensively is a chance here. Now, it is worth noting, and I'm the first one to be talking about this. I put it out on Twitter. Murray, Porter, Jokic hasn't always looked the prettiest. 126.4 offensive rating when they're on the court together. 126. An absurd number. Probably the greatest trio to play as many minutes as they have offensively. Like, I don't know if there's a trio out there, but there probably is. One or two of them, but there's not going to be many. I already told you that the Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry trio for over a 3 year and basically 3 times the sample size of what Murray, Porter, and Jokic has, they have a worse offensive rating by 3.5 points per 100 possessions, like a meaningfully lesser offensive impact. It's close enough though that you could say, okay, adjusting for eras or this, or, sample size or whatever, it's close. But still, if we're talking about arguably the greatest offensive trio in the history of the game, and Murray, Porter, Jokic exceed that, I'm sorry, and they haven't really quite fit together. I think that the MPJ fit question is a little bit smaller than probably the average fan or skeptic, Nuggets skeptic feels. Number 4, Jamal Murray's health. How long will it take for him to be 100%? We all have this timeline in our head. We had a timeline in our head last year, by the way, that, he comes back in April and he doesn't look great. It's 1 year. He comes back, he doesn't look great. And then by the first round, maybe he's a little, second round, he starts to get better. And if the Nuggets go past that, he's fully back. That timeline obviously way off. Did not work with Jamal Murray. Jamal Murray never came back and didn't even play 5-on-5 meaningful 5-on-5 basketball until a month ago at the lead up to Summer League, in less than a month ago. So the question, we have this timeline in our head. Well, okay, now he's playing 5-on-5 and there's 2 months before training camp and then another month of training camp. So you got 3.5 months before your first game. By then he'll be at 90%. And it's just a matter of getting his mind and everything right. We have that timeline in our head. And by the way, I kind of buy it. My timeline that I predict would be that Murray comes back and plays 20 to 25 minutes in October, goes up to 25 solidly every night in November. By the end of the November, he's up to 30 minutes per night. And by January, he's just full 100% back to the Murray that we more or less expected. Is it 100%? Is he scoring 50 points on 25 shots? Maybe he's not quite doing that at any point this year, maybe into the playoffs. But I think that he's back enough to where he's a consistent 18 plus per game scorer, and he's a guy that has moments and has flashes. That's kind of my predicted timeline. But there's always a chance that's not the actual timeline. There's always a chance that he comes into training camp and is behind schedule. And there's even a chance that we get into the season and we go, is it actually better if Murray comes off the bench? Or is it Murray's not ready to play even at the start of the season? It's possible. It's possible. I don't think that's the timeline. I think that the team is going to push him. I think he's going to push himself, and he'll try to be at that 20 minute per game. But what if you start playing in October and knees swelling up? Just kind of not expected here. November, you're still at 20 minutes per game because we're trying to get that swelling under control. And then by December, by Christmas, all right, we're ramping up. We're only ramping up to 28 minutes, whatever. And he's not quite, he looks like he's 80% of his old self, not 100%. It's within the realm of possibility. Who knows? With Jamal Murray, we're all taking shots in the dark, but that's one thing that could just derail the season. If Jamal Murray takes longer to be back to himself, and even not back to himself, but just to be able to play 30 minutes a night, that changes everything. All of a sudden, Highland's playing more minutes. All of a sudden, you don't know like, do you have your closing identity? Murray, Jokic, done. That's the closer. You're going to close every game like that. And you're probably going to be very, very good. You don't do that. Are you closing with Bones? Do we get into an uncomfortable situation where it's like Murray's playing well, but we got to close with Bones because he's the better option because Murray's only 70% of himself. It's on the table. And it'll be one of those things. So what percentage will he be? What's his health look like? That's one thing that could totally derail the season. All right, let's take a final break. On the other side, we have to do rapid fire for some of these, including some bench and some Bones things, backup center, and KCP, some questions about him on the other side. All right, back here. Segment 3, final segment here on a Friday. Get you guys out on the weekend with some disaster scenarios. A fun little Friday. Going to talk about the sky could fall for the Nuggets. How could it do it? No, but honestly, it's good. It's important to kind of put these out there, these things of like, hey, here's what Denver's dealing with. Here's where the risks are. These ones are more basketball related. So I got 4 left. Number 1, bench scoring, or bench shooting, I should say. Here are the reliable shooters, proven reliable shooters. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. There's only one proven shooter, in my opinion. I'm actually moving one guy down a little bit. Proven reliable shooters, I would say Zeke Naji. I think he's the only one. 2 years, both years over 40%, very consistent three-point shooter, low volume, knows what his shots are, and he knocks them down. Some people might say he's unproven still because the total isn't that high. I feel like Zeke Naji gives you floor spacing. If he shot 35% this year, I still would think he would provide that floor spacing because it's a good-looking shot. I think he's going to shoot 38 or higher. I think he'll get good looks, and he just knows where his shots come from. Unproven / streaky shooters. I've got Bones Highland in this group. Christian Brown, Davon Reed, Colin Gillespie. Bones, it's more about being unproven. I think Bones, after this year, will be in the reliable shooters category. I think he's a reliable shooter. The thing about Bones is he's been a pretty streaky shooter in his rookie season. He's had games where he's gone really cold, and he's had games where he's gone insanely hot. We all know that he was the first player? Was it the first player in first rookie to have 4 threes in one quarter or something like that, if I remember that stat right. But he has games where he has shot really, really well, and he has games where he shot 2 of. He has a game where he shot 2 of 12, a game where he shot 6 of 10. Let's see, what's the worst? 1 of 7, 5 of 7. Like again, the part of this is the type of threes he takes. He has the ball in his hand. I think as a catch and shoot 3-point shooter, he would be in the Zeke Naji range, 100% reliable. The thing is, the role he takes on with that second unit is not going to be that. Like, he's not going to have a lot of just catch and shoot opportunities, I don't think. I don't know who's going to be driving and dishing for him. Maybe a little bit of Bruce Brown, Jeff Green or something. But for the most part, I think his threes will be a little bit more difficult. And some nights, 2 or 3 deep threes off the bounce, drains them. Crowd goes nuts. Some nights, 2 or 3 deep threes off the bounce, misses all of them, and it just ends up cold. So I think he's going to be a streaky shooter for the bench. Christian Brown, we just don't know. He's billed as a 3-point shooter. He didn't shoot it well in Summer League. I don't know if that necessarily means anything, but he's at very best, he's an unproven 3-point shooter at the NBA level. Davon Reed shot the ball well last year. Unproven, though. I have no idea. If you told me Davon Reed shot 41% from 3 this year, if you told me he shot 34% from 3, I don't know which one I'd believe more. I don't know. I don't know which one I would predict. Where's he going to be closest to? I don't think anybody knows where Davon Reed, especially when you talk about he goes from being an extra guy that's not on the scouting report to if he is in the rotation, he's going to be a guy that everybody studies like, oh, okay, this is what he can and can't do. Force him this way, close out, put this body on him, whatever it is. And then Colin Gillespie, he was such a good 3-point shooter in college that I think it's going to translate. He shot well in the G League or in the Summer League. So I think he is more likely to be a proven or reliable shooter by the end of the year, but it's the NBA. He's never been there, and he's a two-way guy. So I'm going to call him unproven. Then mediocre shooters. Jeff Green, Bruce Brown, Vlatko Cancar, Ish Smith, Jack White. All of those guys these are bench players. All of those guys are like, we kind of know what kind of 3-point shooters they are, and they're not that great. They're certainly not floor spacers. They can knock down the open shot, but they're not going to be giving you 40% on volume. None of those guys. And then lastly, bad shooters, Peyton Watson, DeAndre Jordan. Those guys are just bad shooters. So the bench has one great shooter. You can throw out a lineup. I think it's going to be the lineup where you go with Bones Highland, you go with Davon Reed, Bruce Brown, Zeke Naji, and Jeff Green. I think that is likely going to be the go-to night one second unit, guys 6 through 10. Bones Highland, Zeke Naji, good shooters. Jeff Green, Davon Reed, okay shooters. Bruce Brown, not a great one. Is that enough shooting? It's just it's one thing I worry about. All of those guys are prone to cold spells, and if you end up having 2, 3, 4 nights in a row, they're definitely a group that I could see being a confidence thing impacting that, and it's spiraling. So shooting off the bench, I think, is a real concern for the Nuggets this year, and it could be one of those things where there's not answers. Like if they're not shooting the ball well, it's not like, well, we got to put in, there's not like a great option there. We got to put in Vlaco, he'll save it. We're going to put in DeAndre Jordan because it's going to affect this. There's not a lot of like, okay, well, we put in our shooting option now. He was a third stringer, but we know he's an ace shooter, and it's going to fix that. Next one on my list, Bones Highland regression. He had a very good rookie season, And the Nuggets, I think, really need him this year. They need him to be at least as good as he was last year, and probably a little bit better. Monte Morris was a very good backup point guard, one of the best in all of the NBA. Bones is a different type of player. His highs are certainly higher, but what they lost in Monte was a floor that you knew you got running the team. Now, he had to be a starter last year, but we all know he was a second-year guy or a bench guy for the last several years, and he was a security blanket of sorts for that second unit. You knew you were getting good stuff out of that second unit because they had Monte out there. With Bones, much higher peaks, much lower valleys. And if this is a year where he gets in a rut or something's going on with him, they just really need him. He can't have a regression year. And I think there's actually a little bit more pressure. A rookie coming in, like Christian Brown will have a little bit of this year. Christian Brown comes out and doesn't play well. It's rookie season. Team doesn't have you penciled into the rotation. I think they would like you to be there, but they're not relying on you. This year, sophomore season with Bones, pressure's on. Like he could ruin the season for them. Bones Highland can ruin the season for the Denver Nuggets if he doesn't perform well. Again, I don't think this is going to happen. I think he's going to have a very good year and he's going to shine. And I think he's a great player. And because I think he's a great player, but there is that pressure on him where all of a sudden we could look at the way we looked at Facu this last year. And he got, I think, too much blame, but also he got too much blame because there was some truth to, hey, he is the piece that most doesn't fit here. And and this is happening. With Bones, it could be that where that second unit needs a guy to be running it. They need a guy that's scoring. They need a guy doing a lot of different things. If Bones isn't providing it, he's probably going to be taking a little bit of the pressure and some of the flack for that. So him having regression could be bad. And then here's the big one. He's never played 82 games. He's never played 20, 25 minutes per game. He might have to play more than that. Again, if Jamal Murray is hurt, he might be playing 30 minutes every now and then, back-to-backs. Murray's not going to be playing back-to-back. So we might get Bones Highland playing 20 minutes one night and then 33 minutes on a second night of a back-to-back on the road. He's never done that before. He's never been asked. We know last year he rolled his ankle a couple different times. We know he's already slight of frame. And while he plays tough, the thing that, skinny or undersized players, what happens to them is, can they just handle all the bumps and bruises along the way? You get a shoulder popped out of socket and all of a sudden all year you're dealing with a little bit of an injury there. Can he play at that? They need him to, because I don't think the Nuggets, again, can survive tons of minutes with Ish Smith running the show there, especially when you just factor in all of the shooting question marks. We just talked about the shooting off the bench. You take Bones Highland out of that. All right, Ish Smith, Davon Reed, Bruce Brown, Zeke Naji, Jeff Green. One good shooter there. It's Zeke Naji, and he's a low-volume shooter. That's not great spacing, and that could get really, uncomfortable. So Bones Highland regression / staying on the court, handling and more pressure and a bigger role. It's really important. And then lastly with Bones, one thing, because I love Bones. He's been on our show. We hope to do even that more this year with him. I mean, everybody loves his personality. He's great. Young players get chewed up in this league. What I mean by that is this league, and you see sometimes with his tweet, I'm not trying to read too much into this, but you see it sometimes where he'll share like somebody's really trying to steal from me, or man, you got to watch your back, or this or that. The NBA is just full of hangers-ons. There's full of people that are trying to get into your inner circle or this or that. And there's media articles that'll come out about you that players will feel are unfair. And hey, I get it, man. When people talk about DNVR or something over here, right or wrong, or they kind of get something right, or they completely make something up. Like you've had to train yourself not to let it affect you. With NBA players, it's 100 times bigger than that. And we know Bones is seeing this stuff. We know that he's online and noticing the way that people talk about him. So this second year, he has such a great spirit. So much of him is about his energy and his positivity and this or that. but the NBA chews players up and spits them out. Austin Rivers talks about it all the time. Like the mass of the media / fans, just the way people talk, they pick guys and it's, oh, this is a good guy and this is a bad guy. And oftentimes it's because of one little thing. Like, oh, so-and-so, we heard he yelled at a coach one time. Bad guy. With Bones, that's one thing I worry about with him is that he's so open. He's so fun. He's so positive. I hope this league doesn't start to chew him up a little bit and change him in any way, because I feel like that positive energy is something Denver definitely needs as part of their core identity. The backup center position is another one here. Is DeAndre Jordan really out of the rotation? And does JaMychal Green and Zeke Naji work as a 4-5? I think Nuggets fans in particular are tainted by this question because last year they tried a small ball lineup that did not work. I think that had more to do with Facu. Again, I'm not trying to blame Facu. I don't think Facu is a good point guard for a non-center lineup. So if Denver would have solved the rolling center question, I think that they would have solved to some degree the Facu question. Denver ends up getting DeMarcus Cousins, and Facu I don't think works with him either. You want a lob threat. You want somebody that puts a different type of pressure on the rim. And so Facu goes out of the lineup. And then it worked, but they had a true center. And I think everybody thought, oh, well, it was getting rid of Facu. I think it was a little bit of just finding a fit that worked better. And there was one piece they could change. You basically put Boogie in for Facu, and all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense. This year, does it work with Bones? Does Bones need a lob threat? Because if he does, if it's actually better, then DeAndre Jordan's going to play more. If he doesn't play more, can you make it work with Green and Zeke now that you have, a Bruce Brown and a Bones Highland around you? I really don't know the answer to that question. To be honest with you, the Nuggets second unit is a big mystery to me. I could see it having a good upside and having a good impact, but I also could see it struggling a lot more than we think, not because they're not good players, but because the fit. Like if I just ask 10 people, what's the backup by game 20, what's going to be the backup 5, the bench 5 players on the court, you'd probably get 2 or 3 different answers. If I ask my colleagues, Matt Moore and Harrison Wind and these guys, some might say it's Christian Brown. Some might say Davon Reed. Some might say it's DeAndre Jordan at the 5. Some might say it's Zeke or Jeff. There's just a lot of different things that can happen here. And that question, I think, could become another one for the Nuggets. And then lastly, and this one I think is more interesting than probably most people will think, KCP not fitting quite like we expect. I don't think it's likely, but I think it's more possible. Like everybody's penciled it in as, oh, that's a perfect fit. It's a perfect fit. And I think the top 20th percentile outcome is that it is a perfect fit. The middle 50th percentile is that it's a good, not great fit, but help, some degree of it really makes an impact, what have you, but it's not like the perfect guy. And then I think there's the smaller percentage outcome where I always think back to Gary Harris. Before Jamal Murray had really arrived, when he was just a prospect that was trying to break in, or before he was even on the team, Gary Harris was rising specifically in his usage. I think he got up to 20% usage, or 20. His usage was up above 20 for 2 seasons, his 2 best seasons. When Jamal Murray started to rise, it was right when Gary Harris was hitting his slump. Now, are those things connected? Probably not 1-to-1. But I do think there's some kind of connection there, meaning I think there was other things that happened with Gary Harris, injuries, maybe, a loss of confidence or a bunch of different things. But I do think some of this is a team only has so much usage to go around. The Nuggets, Jamal and Jokic, they take up a lot of that, and rightfully so. They're the team's 2 best players. They need to take up a lot of it. I think again, a small part, but at least part of Gary Harris's fall and then bounce back, by the way, in Orlando and his risen again, coincides with the fact that he didn't adjust as well to being such a low usage player. KCP over the when he was in with the Lakers, his usage was around 14, which is what Gary Harris's was his final 2 years that he was in Denver, around 14. That's where KCP's was in Los Angeles around good players. And he seemed content with that. They were winning. He played well. He was heralded as a great player. The last 2 seasons, he's been more on bad teams, and his usage has been up in the 19 range, right around 19. So my question, and I don't know that we know the answer to this, I think part of Denver giving him the extension early was trying to, mostly it was just about safety. You don't want a player that could leave at the end of the year. But I also wonder if part of this is, don't worry about your numbers. You've got guaranteed lots of money. I don't remember what it was, $40 million or something, guaranteed coming to you over the next 3 seasons if you want. You're locked up for 2. Don't worry if you score 2 or 3 points less per game than what you were scoring when your usage was higher. Don't worry if you're touching the ball a lot less. Like, we don't want you focused on that. Can you be content back down in that 13, 14 usage lane? I think he's going to like that. I think it's the best that suits his skill set. But how many times, Jeremy Grant, how many times have we had a player that we're like, oh, he's in the perfect role for himself? Low usage. He doesn't have to do anything but catch and shoot. And they're like, yeah, but I don't want that. I want something more. I don't know anything about KCP. I don't know him well enough. I know his game well enough to say, I think this is the ideal role for him, but I don't know him well enough to say that's the ideal role I want for myself. So KCP not quite fitting like we expect is one piece of this that, again, I think it's a low risk thing, but it's something that could happen that would derail the season. Does KCP just want a little bit more? Is he a little bit closer to Will Barton than people realized? Will Barton's another guy that wanted a little bit more usage, and asking him to be less at some times, I don't think there was ever like vocally. I don't think it was one of those things where players were fighting with him, just like I don't think it will be with KCP. But is it one of those things where he comes in and 2 or 3 times a game, he takes a dribble drive or shot that Jokic kind of looks at and is like, dude, what was that? What are we doing here? And it just doesn't quite fit. Is his defense not quite as high at the level that we expected? Those are things that the Nuggets, if you talk yourself into why are they going to win a championship this year, it's because of their top 7 guys, and namely because of their starting lineup. And maybe you could switch Bruce Brown for Aaron Gordon or Bruce Brown for Michael Porter, and that you also include that as to why they're going to win. But if KCP isn't quite that dude, if he doesn't shoot the ball as well because he's not touched, some guys need touches to shoot the ball well. Like, I haven't touched the ball for an entire quarter. Now you want me to hit a wide open corner 3? I can't do that. If he's one of those guys, it lowers Denver's best punch, and they have to win with their best punch. So those are the things, guys. I'm curious to hear. You guys can reply in the comments here. I'll try to look at them afterwards. I'm curious what you think about these, and if there's another thing that you see that's like, hey, this is a thing that could, however unlikely or likely, it's a thing that could derail the season and have them not reach their full potential this year. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this week. I'm going to take the weekend off, and we get back. Matt Moore and I back together. Can't wait to hear all of his takes. He gets a week to rest his takes, so he's going to come in firing. He's got them all saved up. I can't wait to hear.